Hello, everyone, and welcome to Soda Soccer's Post Loons, a one-of-a-kind, one-stop shop for all sorts of things: post-match reaction, analysis, discourse, everything you want on your Minnesota United game chatter. Um, I am not Jeremy Rushing, as you have probably noticed. I am Eli Hoff, an occasional guest who is now in the driver's seat, but joined by the very experienced Dominic Bisogno. Dom, how are you doing? What were you? What's the immediate temperature after a rain lengthened game? We'll call it.
Yeah, I'm good. It's great to be on here. Yeah, immediate temperature is I think a little lukewarm. Not too freezing, not blistering hot, but definitely a unnecessarily mild lukewarm.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think I can't imagine being one of the people in the stadium tonight, but I think they would all take being lukewarm right now. So I'd think we have to feel pretty good having watched from home there. We do want to start with a quick thank you for the sponsors who make this all possible over at Soda Soccer, those being Stimulus Athletic, Ninth Street Soccer and Coffee, and Pence Homes. We'll hear more about them later, but we do thank them for their support in making Post Loons possible. We want to hear from you. We want your takes. We want your insight, all of that. Feel free to drop that in the comment section. We are able to see that, and we will bring that up on the screen and go through your feedback. I guess we'll start off with our kind of three takes here. Dom, your first thing that you brought up was that the attack still lacks real rhythm. What were your thoughts on the attack there?
Yeah, it felt like there were plenty of periods of time where we had the ball, where we were moving the ball forward, but there were also just consistently moments where players that are needed to perform well in the attack, the Reynosos, the Amarias, were just not. It didn't seem like they were all kind of plugged into the same output. It seemed like multiple times Amaria, for example, just as an example, would just kind of make a pass to nothing or to a Nashville player. And that's not. I'm not saying simply him because I think it was just him. I think it was most of the front half of the team had moments like that. But certainly when your striker's part of that causes a lot of big problems. So yeah, it felt like there wasn't a lot of. I don't know if it's an issue with literal communication or sort of subconscious communication, body language, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of understanding in big moments between the key attacking players.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I think one of the interesting things about this game was that I really expected Minnesota to kind of lean into the speed of its counterattacks, because that's an easy way to beat Nashville's press, is just to get through their lines so quickly so that all of a sudden there's only three guys behind the ball. That's something that Seattle was able to do last week, and it worked. But Minnesota, and granted, it's a rainy game that slows everything down, so maybe this just comes with one fat grain of salt as far as that's concerned. But it felt like there were communication issues just in the counters, that they weren't as kind of like snappy as you expect them to be with kind of one-touch passing. That there were times where the counterattack stalled just because the pass was played behind a little bit, or just the run wasn't, where it seemed like some of these players thought it was going to be, and that slowed the attack down. That lets Nashville catch up, and then all of a sudden the attack's just not as potent as you thought it was going to be. So I think you're absolutely right there. Rhythm did prove to be an issue and a limiting factor in some of those counters. My biggest thing that I found interesting was just how much the midfield really does matter. We had a really, really great game from Hassani Dotson, aside from the goal, because that wasn't even really related to his play in midfield. He was just in the right place at the right time, which is good and fantastic. But Will Trapp struggled in the first half. He's an excellent passer. His passing completion percentage, I want to say, I don't have the number in front of me. I think it was like 72%, which is that's not his usual standard. He finished the game at about 80, which is more what you expect from Will Trapp, but that makes a difference. Meanwhile, Hassani Dotson played as more of the connector that I think we kind of want him to be, and that he kind of needs to be in that number 8 role. So I think seeing two sort of differing performances, Will Trapp struggling in the first half, but Hassani being great throughout this game, I think we saw sort of what the midfield might look like for this team. And I'm more convinced by Hassani as the 8 here. Obviously Kervin Arriaga is still going to have a say, and Will Trapp's going to be better than he is tonight. But that influence of the midfield really made a difference. And with a team like Nashville that's going to press so much, that midfield becomes even more important as far as building out of the bat goes. And, Nashville's press worked. There were times where it won the ball higher up than, would be optimal, but it wasn't blowing apart this defense like I thought it could. And some of that comes down to Hassani being a good connector there. Dom, any thoughts on the midfield?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with really everything you said there. I think leading into this game, I think everyone kind of expected Trapp would start, and also there was conversation about how positive people felt about Arriaga after the first game in Philly, and of course it seems like he was not available for today. But I think I agree with everything you said about the performance today. I thought overall, Trapp and Dotson looked very, very good together. I think there's a good dynamic there, and which is great because it would seem to be that they're going to be the designated two for those positions. So obviously you want what the coach wants to be playing to be what works. And that's also encouraging in the sense that it means Arriaga's going to have real competition for minutes. It's not going to be easy for him to get those. Trapp's return very much made that clear. So I think that's a good takeaway from an overall mild game, is that we have three guys that deserve minutes in those various positions, and that's never a bad thing.
Absolutely. All right, time for some Bongi talk. Storyline of the second half, equalizer. Forget about the equalizer. We saw Bongi.
Yeah, I mean, I was really hoping that he would be the one to score. It didn't happen, but Juanwane was. I guess my first point was really about the miscommunication in the attack, and you brought up some of the slow moments or the sort of lack of spontaneous, quick passes on the counter, that sort of thing. Felt like as soon as he came on, that's changed, and someone was doing that, and someone was making those quick runs, making those quick decisions, making those quick passes, and doing them relatively well, and that was really encouraging. Before the season started, there was a lot of plot lines about him that were mostly talking about the silliness around some of the social media stuff around it, which was great, and we 10K did that too because it was funny. But I think very few people were sure what he was actually going to be for this team as a player. There was talk about, is this more of a Minnesota United 2 player? Like what is this? Who is this guy, and how does he actually fit into the map for this MLS team? And particularly after tonight, he did also play against Philly, of course, but particularly after tonight, I actually feel like this is like a genuinely good player that could be playing MLS games for us like week in, week out. I don't necessarily think he's a starter, but he very much seems like a good substitute to consistently have. I actually think it would be a mistake to kind of throw this guy down to MLS Next or MLS Next Pro for a month or two at a time. I think he should be staying with the first team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's really encouraging because it's another option first off, another option they have, but an option that is bringing something that a lot of other players seem to be lacking right now, which is that dynamism, that sort of hunger and energy in the attack, being a little risky. And a lot of what people say when they bring him up is sometimes he does things wrong. I don't even necessarily think he does that many things wrong, but I think that's a little overplayed almost. But those risky moves are often necessary, particularly against a team like Nashville, who's very good at defending. So I didn't quite play out tonight in the sense that he didn't create a goal, but I think he showed tonight he has real potential with this team at this specific level, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. I think that's a lot more than everyone expected.
Yeah, absolutely. I like you, and I think like everyone else, I really didn't know what to expect beyond there would just be some Twitter hubbub when he entered the game. And of course there was. We got our moment. But I was right away, his first run he made down the left flank and dribbled in. I was kind of shocked because, one, as a younger guy entering a new team, and he played in Philly, but this is significant minutes. That takes some confidence and some gusto to just take the ball and do what he was doing tonight. And so that's encouraging from kind of a confidence standpoint. But I think also more tactically, he really filled the Franco Fragapane role really well of, Reynoso is going to be the guy with the ball, and that's fine. But the system, and I'll talk about this a little bit, it's my third thing, my spoiler now, is just what happens when Reynoso can't be the guy with the ball? How do you find a way so that he can work off ball? That requires somebody else to be the one who's going to dribble and advance the ball. And Bonke did that really, really well. And he was working through traffic and stuff, and it looked good. There are times where you sort of wish once he gets into traffic that he kind of finds a way to get more directly out of traffic, like just kick the ball out to somebody else instead of trying to maintain control. But that's me saying that as someone who can't dribble through traffic to save my life and is sitting here in a comfy leather chair 500 miles away watching this on my laptop. Like, my criticism there is just null and void. So I'm really encouraged by that. Him getting 45 minutes in a game like this, even if it was broken up and rain soaked, just kind of chaotic for most of it, that's still really good for development. So I think it's both a good thing that he's going to get playing time. Hopefully an injury to Fragapane, a hamstring thing, isn't more than just, hopefully it's contained to this game and it was being on the cautious side, because those hamstring injuries can just stick around. But he earned his playing time and he took advantage of it. Seems to have a really good skill set that's going to fit with this team. So I'm certainly excited there. My second thing here is about defensive depth, because I think with 2 games here, we've seen this kind of makeshift backline. I'm feeling pretty confident with my evaluation of defensive depth that the combo we saw in the second half of this game has to be the go-to depth combo now, which feels weird to be talking about a go-to depth combo, but I have a feeling that we're going to be talking about depth with this defense a lot this year. O'Neal Fisher did not bring much on the right, but all of a sudden you bring him to the left and his game completely changed. Actually, I'll probably tweet it once we're done here, but for folks who are so inclined, go to MLSsoccer.com, go to the stats page of this game, go to player stats, scroll all the way down to the chalkboard and click on just O'Neal Fisher to see what his contributions were. And you can see when he got moved to the left side, he was getting drastically farther up the pitch. He was actually playing like a fullback and contributing to the attack, which wasn't something that was really happening in the first half. So he's definitely going to look better on the left than the right. I think we learned that. I think we learned that DJ Taylor can contribute and look fine there. Debasi as a left back played much better this game than the Philly game. Some of those crosses, that one cross that just missed Amaria's head was a dime. That was beautiful. He looked really good there, got moved in. We'll talk about subs at some point, I'm sure. I was a little confused as to why exactly taking Coleman out at halftime was the decision. He seemed to be having a pretty good game, but his passing was something I had never seen him pass the ball like this, like he did tonight with that back heel and some of his diagonals. So it was a good game for defensive depth, but I think we learned a couple key things: that DJ Taylor's a fine fill-in, O'Neal Fisher's probably better on the left, and that it'll be really nice to have Chase Gasper back, to have Roman Metnair back, and Debasi staying tucked in the whole time. But an encouraging performance, I think, from the defensive depth. The goal aside, and we will get to that was not good. But outside of that, lock down a good attacking unit.
Yeah, I definitely think, to your point, how you started your point, I think that the 4 we ended the game on, with Taylor coming in, that seems like a more suitable 4 defenders moving forward. Now, obviously, we'll see what happens if they have to play the Rebels, which are, maybe we'll look a little silly in a week. But off of what we have to work with, they looked pretty good tonight, and they certainly did a decent job of shutting down the various moments that Nashville had in the attack in the second half. So, Taylor maybe a little more natural in that position, and as you noted, O'Neal, looked a lot better when he switched sides. And I mean, it's too bad that maybe we found that out this late, but once you know. So I'm curious if we see them as the set for the next game. Obviously, there's a week of preparation before that gets decided, but I agree that was interesting 2 different back fours that we watched tonight. That kind of, in a way, goes into my third point, just in the sense that substitutions were at play in the defense tonight. In that, this has been kind of like a narrative for a long time with this team, while in MLS, being coached by Adrian Heath, which is that there was an unused substitution tonight, with what most people would debate is either our first or second best striker on the bench. That seemed like a very interesting call to me. Obviously, the first 2 substitutions were done right around halftime, so they were used actually quite early, and to great effect for what it's worth. I don't want to ignore that those were maybe good substitutions or good players to bring on, but it was a little strange to me to have a game at 1-1, particularly because one could argue Amaria did not have a great game, and to have Unu on the bench and just decide to do nothing with him. That was an interesting call to me. I don't. Maybe there was a reason for it, but just off of what I saw, I don't quite know why you wouldn't bring him on for the last 10 minutes. So, that's been a issue some people have had with this team for years now. Not always using all the substitutes they have or using them when needed. And it maybe is a slight concern to continue to see that. And a year that we suspected would have a lot of substitution of strikers and a lot of rotation of strikers, tonight we literally saw none of that. So that's a little concerning for me. Obviously, if someone had banged in a goal at the end and we'd won 2-1, it wouldn't have been as noticeable. But it's noticeable either way, and it's especially noticeable when you don't win. So curious to see if that is the start of a trend or the return of a trend, or if maybe next game we see a more usual rotation of strikers.
Yeah, I think one of the substitutions that was kind of in my mind too was just bringing on Dunladi for load. Even it's just Abu can kind of play in that winger role if need be, or just turn that into another striker role. Who knows what sub availability looked like, and guys having chances to warm up with that second half being what it was. But yeah, in a game when, especially once Nashville just kind of fully committed to bunkering there, really those last 10-15 minutes, and it was beyond that, but really those last 10-15, they were just playing their little 4-4-2 block and not shifting out of it too much. Why not throw on another striker to try to push up a little bit, and it's another target for a long ball. And I agree with you there. I'm sure someone will ask Adrian about it in this press conference, and we'll see on Twitter soon here what the thinking was there, because again, only using 2 of the subs. My third thing here was what I alluded to earlier, that Reynoso's number 2 is still a problem, not in the bathroom sense, but in the on the field sense of who's going to be the complementary player alongside of him, who's going to be the one to be able to work with the ball at their feet and allow Reynoso to slip off ball. Reynoso's being man marked for parts of the match tonight, and that's going to complicate things for him, and that means the attention has to be shifted elsewhere. Someone else has to dribble with it. I think usually it's Franco Fragapane, but I'm a fan of his, but he can be inconsistent at times, and if he's going to miss time here with a hamstring injury, who steps up into that second role is going to be a factor. Robin Lud's great, but he isn't really an on the ball creator. Most of what he's going to do is going to be making runs and passing, shooting, stuff like that. It's not really going to be actually making things happen with the ball at his feet too much. Is that going to be bonky? It could be. It very well could be. But I think there's still a question mark over who's going to work with Reynoso, because Reynoso looks a whole lot better in every situation when he's freed up more to not have that primary load-bearing responsibility, even though he's going to have that, but just not be the only source of offense, because it becomes easier to take one guy out of the game there when he becomes the only focus for the back line. So I think figuring out who else can kind of advance the ball, carry that load, soak up some defensive attention, just to give Reynoso some time to make a few runs and get open and off the ball. That's going to be a factor going forward for this attack, especially when we look at it in these sort of not counterattack scenarios where everybody's kind of moving and getting open, but in some of these breaking on the block in possession moments, that's where it really becomes evidence that you watch Minnesota in possession, and there are times where it just doesn't feel that convincing that they're ever actually going to break through. It feels like it's going to have to come on a set piece or a counter, and those are both great opportunities, don't get me wrong, but creating chances through possession is a necessary thing as well.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you bring up there, because it's exactly what I was feeling when this was starting to happen. That point towards the end of the last 15-20 minutes of the game, where it just kind of felt like, I don't think anything's going to quite happen here. It just didn't seem like any ideas were occurring that were going to have any danger, and an open play anyways. Mm-hmm. And that's a rough thing to start feeling when you still got double-digit minutes left in a game, and at home. That's
Yeah.
not that's and again, we've kind of been talking. Many of our points have in some way alluded back to sort of maybe concerns about the attack, and that's essentially that same idea again. But yeah, it's a little concerning to see the home side with still some of a crowd seeming to just kind of have run out of ideas, which again I suppose then goes back to my point of maybe you should bring someone else on who might have an idea. But yeah, it was tough. It was tough to see the well dry out a little bit towards the end there. At the same time, the asterisk that has to go over all of this, of course, is that Nashville are very good at doing this, and we shouldn't ignore that. This didn't happen against FC Cincinnati. God bless them. This was against a team that, I think in the last 10-day episode when Jeremy and I were talking about this game, we literally were talking about how like fate was against anyone who thought this wouldn't happen. And by the way, John on his preview article got the scoreline right, 1-1.
Yeah,
so,
he called it. He called the draw. Granted, that was also it was safe. Calling a draw in a Nashville game is just that's a little too safe. I don't know how much credit we can really give him.
A small amount of credit. But so that's obviously something to keep in mind, is that this happened against a team that is very good at this specific kind of game. But to repeat what I believe I said in that previous podcast, if you want to be the kind of team that's going to climb up the table, get a high playoff spot, etc., have maybe silverware down the line, you kind of have to be one of those teams that can outsmart teams that are good at things. So there's a buffer to the concern by the fact that Nashville does this a lot, but at the same time, there's a different kind of concern because you would hope that Minnesota United would be able to find that special moment to break that pattern, and they didn't. So
absolutely. All right, we do want to take a moment to give a thank you to Stimulus Athletic. Stimulus Athletic founder and former Minnesota United player Jason Mora began supporting 10,000 Pitches all the way back in summer 2020 when it was just a baby podcast, now being the Soda Soccer Super Machine, I think is the official name these days. But Jason has launched a company that can provide quality game gear and apparel at affordable prices to clubs and teams across all levels. This is a Minneapolis-based company doing great things for local, nationwide, and even worldwide clubs. Minneapolis City, Joy Athletic, Vlora, Dynamo St. Cloud, Tulsa Athletic, the American Outlaws, even the Anguillan national team all use Stimulus to outfit their club with the jerseys, game gear, and apparel they need. Stimulus can do the same for you. It is pretty simple. Just head to stimulusathletic.com. That's on the bottom of the screen there. Start a conversation with their amazing team and let them know that Jeremy from Soda Soccer sent you. I'm ad-libbing here, and I think that we should say that Dom and Eli sent you. Maybe we get extra credit for hosting this, and Jeremy feels silly for taking time away from Minnesota United and letting us run the show. So either way, tell them we sent you. Check out a great brand with the famous face of Minnesota soccer, and that is Stimulus. I think next we need to talk about what happened on the Nashville goal that was scored by them early on in the game. Just defensive sloppiness, I think, is maybe what it is from Minnesota, but it feels almost worse than that it was, three players there left unmarked. O'Neal Fisher gets overloaded at the far post, and he has two guys. Again, he's a great defender, but he marks neither of them. I don't really blame him. Again, it's kind of a caught in a pickle situation. Boxy is on the wrong side of his defender. He's on like the opposite side. So it's basically three guys right there at the far post being unmarked. It's a great ball from Dax McCarty in there, but not a good defensive situation. Is there is it a bigger issue you think there with communication, or what did you kind of see on that first goal?
Yeah, it's interesting because it also falls in the context of there was like a whole first 15 plus minutes of this game that just felt incredibly shaky just across the board. It felt like every Minnesota United player was just a little maybe nervous, or at least visually seemed nervous anyways, with just movement of the ball and just every decision they're making, and perhaps the early goal played into that lasting more than 5 minutes, but it certainly was also evident in those first 5 minutes leading up to the goal. It's a weird one, as you pointed out. This is you pointed out on Twitter as well. This is literally like a play that Nashville did a week ago. And that's a little concerning because you would imagine that would be something you would want to prep for. It didn't seem like what any prep that had been done for that was being brought to the forefront when that situation developed. And I do think you made a good point in there where you mentioned that there were multiple players that kind of found themselves in a pickle, I think is what you said, where it's like, they didn't do the right thing. At the same time, to be fair, I'm not sure what the right thing was.
Yeah.
It was sort of a weird situation where, and perhaps what you take from all that is that back four plus Miller should be prepping in such a way that they do not create those situations for themselves. And that's a concern. At the same time, in team sports, crazy stuff happens and things happen fast. So, I can appreciate that they were trying to, in the moment, do what they thought they could do, and that there weren't a lot of ways for them to cover all the bases they needed to cover. But to answer your question, yeah, I do think that there was a general sort of frazzled state in the back half of the team, especially the first 15 minutes of that game. And that they didn't quite seem, almost in the same way we were talking about rhythm in the attack, there wasn't really rhythm in the defense. There wasn't clear communication, clear ideas, just sort of flowing between the defenders. And so then it became very easy for Nashville to do something to Minnesota in 5 minutes and what it took them, 80 plus minutes to do to Seattle, which is not great. I do think that, we talked about a little bit before about the substitutions that I made in the defense. It is worth then keeping in mind that something was done about it, which is good, and that it seemed to work. That's very important that happens. So on the one hand, yeah, I definitely was not happy with how the whole team looked the first 15 minutes, especially the defense. They seemed uncoordinated and a little confused at times. At the same time, I will credit Heath, who, I was noting the lack of the third substitution, but huge credit to him for making the call early and right at halftime to address that, and it seemed to work. But yeah, and to a degree, I think the Philly game started a little bit frazzled as well, but that's something that Minnesota needs to work on. You especially at home and especially against good teams, you simply cannot start slow. If they start slow against the Red Bulls at New York or at New Jersey, technically, that's going to be a disaster, right? They scored 4 goals in the first half today, the Red Bulls, against Toronto, in Toronto. So, it didn't end up being horribly damning tonight, but I could very well see against the Red Bulls or, God forbid, San Jose, who defend quite poorly but showed tonight they can score goals. Both of those are teams that could very easily punish you for slow starts. So it's something that needs to be addressed without a doubt.
And absolutely, I think the thing that kind of made it frustrating for me is just that the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes, really, the first probably half hour is when the game plan should hold up, because the reason you don't tend to always see a lot of action in those times is because it's teams are still sticking to the script, they're still feeling each other out, they're saying, okay, recognizing things they saw in film the week before and things like that. It's very much that process. So then for something like this to happen, that again, it's a chaotic opportunity that's created, but it's a chaotic opportunity that happens because on a team level there's a breakdown and there's an overload. Again, overloads happen. Like it's good play from Nashville. This is what they did to get a goal against Seattle last week. They almost got another goal out of it later in the first half. I tweeted that clip too, where this was when Dabasi was still playing left back. He got tucked in really centrally. He was right by the penalty spot. Sure enough, Leal goes and just parks on the outside of where Dabasi is. It's an easy overload. Luckily, Dabasi recognized it, and you could tell as soon as he cut over and saw Leal, he started moving back over, which again kind of tells me this was something that was part of the game plan, because immediately he went to close it down. But it still led to an opportunity for Nashville. This is something that Nashville does in addition to all the pressing. It seems like they like to overload the far post. So, it's an unfortunate thing. And I do think it's hard to blame on an individual level, because, when we look at it, we can say the wrong play was made, but what is the right play? Like you mentioned, for Oni Official there, aside from, getting a head or some part of his body on the ball, I'm not sure what he does to defend 2 guys there, right? For Michael Boxall, he was on the right side of his player when the initial ball got sent in, but then when the second ball's coming across the goal, he's on the wrong side. Aside from being able to, teleport through a player. I'm not really sure what he's able to realistically do there, because these are all like big, strong athlete people. It's not like you can just, pick him up and turn him, even though if anybody could on this team, it would be Michael Boxall. So it's hard to be too nitpicky, but it's just one of those situations that's unfortunate. I think is probably the easiest way to put it, and not place too much individual blame, and maybe more just sort of team or systematic blame early on. Another thing that was just of note to me was kind of a systematic disconnect with Robin Lod in the first half. And even the second half too, he had a quieter game, but it felt like he wasn't being utilized much. And I know one of our commenters from last week said it in the Philly game. It felt like Lod was on an island. And no, I disagreed with it last week. I would 100% agree with that sentiment this week, that perhaps it was some of just O'Neal Fisher being the one on the right side there, and maybe it was just Will Trapp being a little off. But it felt like he wasn't getting the usual opportunities that he would, and I'd have to watch it back, but it felt like he was still making the runs. He was still getting in the right spot. It's just, maybe he was being marked better. Maybe it's a situation where guys just weren't passing to him. I'm curious if you saw anything, Dominic, because it just felt like a quieter game from him.
I definitely noticed within the first half, and then repeatedly noticed as the game progressed, that I was just not seeing much of anything to do with him. To your point, I don't necessarily think that was, about him doing anything wrong. It was just he didn't really get the ball. And there was definitely a focus on playing down the left at times. And maybe you mentioned, maybe Fisher being behind him has something to do with that as well, just the way that adjusts his role. Yeah, I don't think against Philly he was necessarily on an island, and not just because he scored that goal, but just in general, I didn't get that feeling from that game. I felt like I was regularly seeing him involved and receiving the ball and being part of play. It felt like it really didn't happen today. I don't know if Honwane coming in at halftime also affects that a bit, because that's a very specific kind of player and he's playing very differently than everyone else. I don't know if that, his energy then kind of furthers whatever the problem may be and kind of sucks the air out of Lod's camp a little bit. But yeah, it was interesting to see very little of him and to see very little opportunity for him, especially given the positive impact he had week one. And again, because the guys that were getting the ball in the attack were not necessarily excelling, it would have been interesting to see how, a tactical shift to focus more on Lod or get the ball to him more in certain positions, how that would have changed the game. We'd have very little way of knowing because it simply didn't happen much. But I agree that it was very noticeable during the game, and then retrospectively, now that we know it ended 1-1, it's a little it's regrettable to me, because this is one of the guys that's been the most productive in the attack, and in the same way that I kind of find myself confused about why you don't bring Unu on in the last 10 minutes. I find myself unsure of why you wouldn't, even literally from the coach to the players verbally, have some sort of note of, hey, play through Lod more, get him the ball more, play on his side more, figure something out, do this, insert thing we do in training, and try to get him more time on the ball, because again, this is one of the more statistically dangerous people we have on the pitch right now. Yeah, that's a little strange to me. I don't know. I don't know if for some reason they felt it benefited them more to not use his side or to not use him in those situations. I would have liked to see more of it, though.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think there's a bigger picture question here about how to use Lod. But first, to keep on pace with our little agenda, we do want to highlight our friends over at 9th Street Soccer and Coffee. They're located in Northeast Minneapolis at 801 South 9th Street. They've got indoor five-a-side soccer, plus a coffee shop. It's a fun little combination. They've opened up their new spring pickup times. There will be pickup 6 days a week, including 2-hour pickup nights, Thursday women's only play, and Friday's 40 plus play, so that you can start your weekend with a fun workout and stay Gen Z free on your Friday nights. Make sure to follow them on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at 9th Street MPLS to find out how to sign up. You can also learn more at 9thstreetmpls.com. And if the 9th Street folks are listening, you should expand to Columbia, Missouri. We are a city down here that I think could use a fun little indoor soccer shop. We have a lot more Gen Z, so I don't know how well Friday 40 plus nights would go. We Gen Zers like to do things on Friday nights, but be sure to check out our friends over at 9th Street MPLS, who are again making this all possible with Post Loons and Soda Soccer. I think there's a bigger picture question about how to use Robin Lod, because we've seen him used really, really differently in just about like, it feels like every year he kind of has a different role for Minnesota, right? It came on as, okay, he's, an inverted left winger. And then it was, okay, maybe he's a right winger, but actually he's a false 9, right? And then, there's been a little bit of number 10 action, and then now he's on the right wing again. And so he's really been so versatile in the attack. But I'm beginning to wonder actually just what is the most effective way to use him, because he doesn't feel too much like a conventional winger. That, he's not really going to run down and cross from the byline guy, and he's not like Fragapane that's going to be more of the take the ball and dribble and cut in sort of guy. He's really sort of just, in terms of positioning and passing being kind of his strengths, he's kind of a false 9 who just is playing on the wing. So like I don't even know how to articulate that, but I'm just just the kind of invisibility today and kind of just weirdness of his style of play, which is a good thing. He's an excellent player, and it's a good problem to have. But I'm wondering if we're going to have the bigger picture debate this year of what the most effective way to use Robin Lod is.
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something there. And while I agree that I don't know if like quite the right definition was found there, I think the problem is I don't think anyone knows it. Yeah. So I don't, if you had found it out tonight, it would have been a big deal. Adrian Heath would have been very interested in your ideas. But yeah, it's fine. As you said, this has nothing to do with whether or not he's good or not. He's very good. He's a very talented player. Obviously, he's had chunks of games at various points in time where he's been a big player for Minnesota United. That's without a doubt, including literally last week. But to your point, yeah, it's hard to know quite what they should be doing with him. I think the left wing idea proved to not be the answer. I think that's pretty clear. But obviously, there's a lot of other ways you can play a forward player than just the left or the right wing. And at the right wing, he has not been bad. But when you see he has some really solid performances at that sort of false 9 role, as you described it. And so you do wonder, is this a guy that we're maybe just playing here because he can play right wing, but that's not really where he should be playing? And of course, that's a problem because we have all the other strikers in MLS. So so the chances of him playing there feel incredibly light to me. I don't think that's going to happen this year or in the near future, anyways. But so then, yeah, to your point, that's a big picture question, because then you're thinking, okay, so we got this guy and we're starting him in a position he might not be suited quite for, and that plan is just to keep him there the whole year. It's a tough situation, and I think we've talked everyone's time and time this whole offseason about this team made a lot of offensive moves, signed a lot of guys or brought back a lot of guys for certain attacking positions, and how does that affect this whole locker room of guys that can play various roles in the attack? How do you find the right blend of these players? The good news is that he seems to he can play a lot of positions, so it's not the end of the world to stick him somewhere else. But as things progress, especially if some of the other striker options don't do well, I do think that it reignites a lot of conversations about whether or not we should continue to play him where we're playing him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think, and this kind of comes back to again, talking in the big picture sense, something that I'd written about in my season preview column that was just kind of asking the questions that I think we're going to be talking about this year. And one of those was just, what's the best way to get the best combination of attacking players on the field? And I was talking about that more in the kind of, in the striker debate. That's still going to be a thing. But you sort of and hearing you talk kind of made me put this together that and this feels kind of obvious to say now, but that Robin Lod plays right wing because that's just the open spot in this attack, right? The number 10 is Reynoso. That spot is taken. The left winger is going to be Fragapane. He's excellent there, and he's certainly better than Lod's there, right? Lod's not going to play up top because theoretically, Amaria and probably Unu are both better options at the 9. So then where's Robin Lod going to go? Right wing. Is that his best position? Maybe, maybe not, but that's just kind of the only open spot. And so I do wonder if as this season goes and as we see more rotation, whether that's, in-game personnel subbing out, does Reynoso get subbed out and does Lod move over to the 10, right? Is that something that happens? These in a personnel pinch, do you play him up top? Do you play him as part of a 2-striker tandem? What would happen if you ran a 2-striker setup? Ignore the attacking midfield. I don't know how this would work, but just up top, Amaria and Lod as your 2 strikers. That's intriguing, right? So, and granted, Amaria and Unu is also intriguing. There are so many questions here and so many different attacking combinations that I think we're going to see Heath try these out. If I were Adrian Heath, there's a bunch of shiny toys in the attack here. I certainly would want to try them out in all different frames and varieties and setups. But I wonder how to fit Robin Lod in the best capacity there. Yeah, we want to hear from you on the show here. Please feel free to drop us a comment on whatever platform you are watching on. Someone from YouTube whose username is simply blah. Perhaps they are summing up the rain delay. I'm not sure. But they say, in the end, that was a hard-fought game against a tough opponent in rough conditions. I'm happy with the result. You mentioned this earlier, Dominic, but I think this is kind of what the sentiment has to be, that Nashville was a very good side in the Eastern Conference, is by all means looking to be an excellent side in the West. They won 1-0 at Seattle last week. That's probably one of the toughest results to get in this whole league. The conditions made this, both teams play in the conditions, right? And so maybe a draw is the safest way to sort of sum things up there. Kind of a crapshoot as far as conditions go. 2 points from 2 games away at Philly, home against Nashville in the rain. Is that a satisfactory result, you think, through these two matchups?
I think when you bring into play, and I brought this up with the Philly game, when you bring into play some of the personnel that is missing, when you bring into play the fact that our starting striker for these 2 games has been a guy that arrived very shortly before the season started. When you put all the context onto it, yeah, I think that drawing 2 good teams, both of which would not surprise anybody if they're in the playoffs this year, one on the road. Yeah, I don't think that's anything to be terribly upset about. We've seen this team as recently as last season start far worse than this. Yeah. And in the case of last season, actually still end up kind of pulling together a good season. So, I'm not terribly concerned. It's probably worth noting also, we've seen just across MLS, a lot of very few teams sort of just like coming out and dominating their 2 games. Mm-hmm. I think there's only 3 or 4 teams that have 6 points right now. There could be 1 or 2 more tomorrow. Vast majority of teams got 2 draws, a draw and a win, a draw and a loss, a couple of 2 losses. But it's been a choppy start, I think, for everybody to a degree, and so in that sense, that's maybe a little comforting. But yeah, look, Nashville, as we've been talking about, Nashville are a good team. They were a really good team in the East. The fact that they've come over to the West was always going to impact the playoff race here, and we played them with some players making their first appearance of the season. Some players, again, kind of makeshift back line. Some players didn't have a full preseason, et cetera. And we ended up with a fairly okay result. That to me leaves plenty of room for growth. And it doesn't terribly concern me. Some of the things we've talked about tonight are points of concern, but it doesn't all build up to me to like some sort of deep concern about the fate of the team or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I've got another comment from Blah again. I won't read a lot there. I'll just leave it on the screen because I think that's a good sentiment and important to realize that, especially as far as, we had a whole conversation about defensive depth, that for the first 2 games, the back line has been just in terms of personnel, 2 out of the 4 probably optimal players there. Only one of those 4 actually playing in their proper position, and yet there's only been 1 goal allowed, and it was just in kind of such a chaotic situation that's not something, what happened in that defensive play, I don't think is a big picture concern for this team. That was just sort of a game plan thing, miscommunication, whatever you want to call it, just weird. So that this team defensively looked much more solid in the second half. Yes, Nashville was attacking with nowhere near the same intensity as the first half, but there was progress made in the second half. Defense seemed like it maybe got figured out a little bit. All of that is it's encouraging. It's development. It's progress, and that's what needs to happen here. And once some starting caliber players start coming back into the 11, I think that's going to make a difference here in a big picture sense. So to get draws out of both those games against 2 really good sides is an encouraging thing. I do think for sure. We do want to give one final thank you to one of our sponsors, to the fine folks at Pence Homes, that being Nate Pence. If you're on Minnesota United Twitter, you probably know who Nate Pence is. If you watched our show last week, you definitely do, because he was on here offering his Minnesota United takes, analysis, all that stuff. That's not all he does, though. Nate and his team of realtors specialize in the St. Paul and Minneapolis area, and he proudly supports various teams and organizations in the Twin Cities soccer community, like Minneapolis City, our pals over at Equal Time Soccer, and of course, sodasoccer.com. Not only is Nate ingrained in the local soccer ecosystem here, he's also helped countless people in and around the metro area buy and sell their homes, making them very happy as a result. Just head to pencehomes.com to get the process started, or email Nate directly at nate@pencehomes.com. That's on your screen now. Once again, make sure to tell him that Dom and Eli sent you. We're showing Jeremy just how high we can fly. We can deliver the ad reads too. We can get folks checking out Nate and the Pence Homes family. So give them a shout for your real estate needs in the Twin Cities area. So Dominic, we'll wrap up here looking at next week away at New York Red Bulls, who put up a lot of goals today in very quick fashion. How confident are you feeling headed into that fixture, and how uncertain is that level of confidence based on personnel availability?
Well, yeah, that's going to be a big one. Is literally who is going to New York? What squad are we bringing? I am confident in our ability to get a result at that game. The only issue, I suppose, is that my definition of result in this case is potentially just a 3rd draw in a row.
Yeah.
I again, like you said, personnel being a big deal. I think if the improvement of our personnel availability is not great, there's a concern that we are going to be the 3rd team that New York scored 3+ goals against. So I'm a little uneasy about this one, but we'll see.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think it's certainly a tough challenge, but in the same sense that Philly was, I think you look at a really good attack. Obviously New York's done a little bit more than Philly has so far this year, but really, really lethal group there. I'm blanking on the player's name by the hat trick in the first half today, but he'll be a threat.
Yeah, Lewis Morgan, yeah.
Yes, Morgan. So that will be an obvious issue of containment. You'd hope another week to get healthy for some of these defenders means they'll be available. If nothing else, perhaps some things were figured out in the second half of this game. I do think one question mark might be what Franco Fragapane is next week if he's available. It's a situation where he could go, but maybe it's better to just only use him the last 15-20 minutes if possible, or if he's good to go but is on a 60-minute limit. Let's say Fragapane's out for hypothetical discussion's sake. Is Bonke the answer? Is it going to strikers somehow? What's kind of the personnel that you might use, considering we are now amid a big picture discussion of what the best way to get the best attackers on the field is if Fragapane's absent on the left wing.
That's interesting. I would like to see at some point the 2 striker system. That's something that even leading up to the season, I kind of joined in on the train for that. That being said, I don't think this is the game to test things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be a bad idea. So I wouldn't hate if Hlonwane gets the start. I think there are risks with that because that's not necessarily something that he, that's going to be new for him, and we haven't seen what he looks like, you know, hour plus minutes in one game. That being said, he looked pretty good for a full half today, and if Fragapane is just completely unavailable, which he could be because obviously hamstrings are very sensitive situations. I do think that would be interesting. I think that he addresses a lot of the concerns that we have. He doesn't necessarily address the rhythm problem per se, but he does address some of the quick reactions and pace and kind of dynamism and hunger for moments, hunger for shots, hunger for opportunities. He brings more of that to the table than some of the other players are doing right now. So, especially against a pretty young Red Bull side that, have, by the way, conceded in all their games. He could be an interesting option. I wouldn't hate to see him in that 11.
Yeah, absolutely. I have two ideas. One being more conventional, and what I would maybe say is what I would put my money on if Fragapane's out, and that one being a 4-3-2-1, 4-3-3, whatever you want to call it. Christmas tree situation. That if Arriaga is back and healthy, put in run Arriaga, Trap, and Dots and all in the midfield, and just clog that up, lock that down there. Again, Arriaga is a player who's coming in with the question mark surrounding his health and a thorax injury. I'll be honest. I'm going to give away my lack of medical knowledge. I thought the thorax was like a part of an insect. I didn't know that was a human anatomy thing as well. Hopefully, Arriaga and his insect body is ready to go because that sounds painful, whatever a thorax is. So hopefully he's good to go. But that's a situation I could easily see happening. Go 3 in midfield there, and then just Reynoso and Lloyd and give him some flexibility to work under Amarilla. Be a little bit more defensive, playing for the draw probably. But if we were to look at this in more of a try and go out and score goals, I'm feeling enabled by the YouTube comments who say, let's get weird. Let's run 4-2-2-2. Was that 3 2s? Just direct line of 2 at every level. It's something the Red Bull system has run in the past. Keep Lud in Reynoso in there, and then throw in Amarilla and Uno up top, and just play for the counter and play positionless and attack. That's when Minnesota United's at its best anyway, when it's not so much wingers and strikers and things, and it's just kind of bodies sprinting towards the goal. It feels sort of like jubilant and artistic that it's just, bodies in space moving towards the goal, but that's when the attack is at its best. So maybe that's the best way to get the best attackers on there. I don't know. I think that's probably too weird for Adrian Heath. I think a Christmas tree's the way to go to lock down the central midfield. But if we want to get a 2-striker setup out there and kind of work that way, let's get a 4-2-2-2.
I don't hate that idea. It's very interesting, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it was too weird for Adrian Heath. I don't think Adrian Heath's the kind of manager that's going to throw that one out there, especially like on the road in an iffy game. I do think that, and to add to your point, if I'm not mistaken, a thorax is an entire third of an insect's body.
That was my thought too. I thought it was like
the middle chunk or the lower chunks.
Yeah, I think it's the lower chunks. It's like head, abdomen, thorax.
I think so. So
yeah,
I don't know what that is on a person. I'm going to assume Arriaga didn't break the entire lower third of his body.
We can only hope.
We can only hope. He's definitely not playing against the Red Bulls if that happens. But if he's healthy, I think you're onto something though with, and I do think this would be kind of a more, this sounds like a negative. I don't really mean it as a negative, but it would be kind of a Heath thing to do to team him up with Dotson and Trap and try to work something with all 3 of them. Because again, that is a game you're going into a little concerned about the defense because of how many goals they're scoring and the fact that we've obviously conceded in our first 2 games. And don't have all our starters on the back line. That could be interesting. And it's a defensive idea, but at the same time, those are all 3 guys that can contribute to the attack. So it's not like a painfully pragmatic idea. I think it still allows for opportunities for the attack. It just more cements the back line. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but if it did, I actually think that could be a smart way to just ensure that the Red Bulls don't, take advantage of spaces, take advantage of players being out of position. It would be a smart way to ensure a strong defense. And the Rebels have scored a lot of goals, albeit they have been playing teams that were expected to not defend very well this year. They played San Jose, they played Toronto. We'll see what they look like against Minnesota's backline, which is perhaps a little more mature and steadfast, and doesn't include a Costa Rican center back.
No idea who you're talking about whatsoever.
No. Who scored, by the way, today? So good for him.
Yeah,
but,
with another Slovakian midfielder who we will also pretend we don't
who
remember.
I'm sure has never been to Minnesota. I actually think I think that's a good idea, and I actually think that it can be done in a way that does not turn the game into a slog. I think there are ways to play with all three of those guys that still allow for opportunity, because they're all guys that can play good passes moving forward, that can take good shots, that can create chances. So I think I would either like to see that or like to see us stick to more or less what we've been doing. I don't think a wild experiment isn't smart for this game. I do think a sort of pragmatic experiment is okay. I'd welcome that. But I wouldn't want to see anything too crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I like the idea of any formation that just makes it more conducive to sit back and defend and hit on the counter, because I think that's the simplest approach that this team can succeed with. Yeah. So we've reached about the end of our time here on Post Loons, but I'll give you one more chance, Dominic. Any closing thoughts, final additions? We've gotten to the part of the show where we're just trying to be weird, and so I think we should let the viewers enjoy their Saturday nights. But any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, just I don't think panic button needs to be hit yet. And I don't think too many people think that, but there's always gonna be somebody. I think this is an okay start. I think it definitely could have been better, but I also think there's a lot of season left, and we've yet to play a team that is expected to be poor this year. I think it'd be interesting to see what we look like when we do play those kinds of teams. Some people would say we played one in 2 weeks when we play San Jose. I think people kind of need to just be patient. Let's see what things look like after 4 or 5 games. There's a lot of things that are going well, probably more than aren't going well. I think most things have ended more positively than negatively so far. And so I'm going to be patient.
I think that's a good way to put it. And the thing that I kind of come back to is just how many options there are here that we're not like in previous years. We've had these questions and things, and it's been, if it isn't the person who's in the starting 11, then who is it, right? Here we have a list of, in just about every position, at least one guy, if not 2 guys, who we can say, well, if it isn't them, it's them, right? If it isn't O'Neal Fisher on the right, it's DJ Taylor, and we're actually able to have conversations around depth. And so that's just a lot more encouraging spot to be. Again, 2 results from 2 games against 2 good teams. Even if it's missed opportunities, it's also opportunities that could have been missed. That sounded like a really bad cliche. I don't know how much that means. But it's not bad results. Next week will be another really good test against New York Red Bulls, and then it's playing a San Jose side that the Loons have historically been able to do very mean but very fun things to, and it's now a revenge game. So looking forward to that fixture as well. But this concludes this week's episode of Post Loons by the Soda Soccer family. Thank you very much for giving us some time on your Saturday night, a little bit later than I think all of us expected with the rain delay. Hopefully you are safe and, to quote Dominic from the beginning of the show, nice and toasty and lukewarm, just like tonight's fixture. Again, we thank you for listening, and we will see you soon, except it'll probably be Jeremy who sees you soon. So on behalf of Jeremy, see you soon. Thanks, everyone.